Crisis Radio, Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. For all the details of that analysis, go to tarpley.net. You got my Russia Today commentary from midweek and then a fairly detailed article about the current picture, right? It's a time of cross currents and mixed signals. The only sure thing is that we have a world economic depression. And indeed, some people are figuring this out. This week we had existing home sales down 27%. That's one of the worst records in history. We've got new home sales down 12%. Unemployment remains bad. Estimate now 1/10. 1 out of every 10 U.S. homes is now behind on payments and maybe headed towards foreclosure. Why? It's time for the Fraser-Lemke Act. It's time to freeze those foreclosures for 5 years of the duration of the crisis. It's time for a homeowners loan corporation to refinance at low rates and cut the principal from the inflated bubble figures, and time for compulsory mediation, which was done in the 30s at the level of states, which was also key in avoiding about 90% of most foreclosures. Credit card rates are being jacked up by the predators in advance of some minor regulations coming through. We also seem to have a capital strike. We've got a capital lockout. Reactionary interest, and this is what we saw in 1937 as denounced by Robert Jackson and by Harold Ickes. This was part of Robert Jackson's practice for dealing with the same kinds of people at the Nuremberg trials, as we're also seeing, but they pointed to a capital strike. In other words, we're told by all these reactionaries, well, we have $13 trillion to invest, but we don't want to do it because we don't know what happens next. Well, that's a capital strike. That's sabotage. That raises some very profound questions. If predatory private interest can do that, that's a conspiracy and constraint of trade. Right? That violates Sherman antitrust and Clayton antitrust if these people are talking to each other about it, which they seem to be doing. But now, the big thing is the Fed. Everybody's worried now about the Fed. The Washington Post of Thursday, August 26th, Fed policy foggy as the economic picture clouds. So foggy and clouds. It's muddled. There's a cacophony. Finance capitalists not happy with Bernanke. Which way is he going? The Jackson Hole meeting on Friday, Saturday of this week will tell the story. Jackson Hole, Wyoming, the yearly confab, right, the yearly junket of all these characters from the Federal Reserve boards, plus, journalists and many others. Bernanke is supposed to give a speech, but we already know something. The Fed is split. This is the Wall Street Journal of Tuesday. Fed split on its latest move to bolster sluggish economy. Now, this is an interesting situation because it means the tensions have now risen to the point where we have two distinct factions, or maybe three, in the Federal Reserve Board. This is the Federal Open Market Committee. That's composed of, I think, 7 of these characters from the Central Board of Governors and 12 from the various districts, except only 5 of them are on at any given time, and one of them is always the New York branch. So we have the center, I suppose. I guess you'd call it center-right, but Ben Bernanke, Donald Cohn, Kevin Warsh, and William Dudley of the New York Fed. He's the key guy. The most powerful mall is William Dudley of the New York Fed. So Bernanke, Cohn, Warsh, and Dudley are in favor of quantitative easing. Right? They say we've got to do something in terms of quantitative easing because the main danger here is deflation. So we don't want to have that. You've got this guy, James Bullard. This, I think, is the Dallas branch. He's quite afraid of deflation. He wants to increase the money supply. And then, of course, on the extreme right wing, you've got somebody who looks like an Austrian, a reactionary, Thomas Hoenig, Hoenig. That's the St. Louis branch. He is now in open rebellion. And some of the other people on this board who supported Bernanke, they did so in a kind of a tepid, half-hearted way. They did it with all kinds of qualifications and doubts. Now, we also have, it's an indication of the malaise in the ranks of Wall Street. Something big, I think, is indeed happening. In the Wall Street Journal of Thursday, August 26th, we've got Alan Blinder, ex-deputy governor, number 2 to Bernanke. The Fed is running low on ammo, and this is what you see, running low on ammo. And here we have a cartoon. and it shows that Bernanke is an archer, and he's got this quiver, and he's looking at the arrows in his quiver, and he's finding that they're not in good shape. He doesn't really have too many arrows left in his quiver. So this is the policy bullets and arrows in the quiver argument. Now, I can solve this. The answer is national banking. Nationalize the Fed. National banking in the tradition of Hamilton, Henry Clay. Lincoln didn't quite get there, but he was for it. And indeed, what Franklin D. Roosevelt did was the de facto nationalization of the Fed during the 30s and into World War II. And it's simply to say, use credit creation, national credit creation for national job creation, a national program of infrastructure, rebuilding and reconstruction and recovery. And it comes down to 0% interest rates, but for real production. Up to now, we've had 0 to 0.25% federal funds, very low interest rates, an all-time low on the 2-year note this past week. This also reflects world fear, but very, very low interest rates. But that money goes preferentially into parasitical financial interest. It goes to the banks, the hedge funds, the money markets, the insurance companies, the credit card companies, all parasitical. What we need is 0% credit for production. Now, even within a policy universe for somebody like Blinder, here's how you could do it. You say, and they've done the equivalent of this quite a few times in the current crisis, you make an announcement saying that the Fed is now willing to discount, at the discount window, the securities, bonds from states or regional authorities like the Tennessee Valley Authority, the New York Port Authority, the Mississippi Valley Authority that I hope we have soon, the Columbia River Authority, the Sacramento River Authority, all the wonderful authorities, the Arkansas River. Those states and authorities are authorized to issue very low interest bonds. They might be, 1% or whatever they are. And the Fed will discount those. So that if the state of Texas has to go to a local bank in Dallas, give them those bonds. Those can be discounted by the Dallas bank with the Fed. You get cash money, and you start building. You start rebuilding your entire interstate highway system. We had a case this week, the Long Island Railroad, biggest commuter railroad in the United States, broke down, scenes of chaos for 2 or 3 days this past week. Take a look at the New York Daily News headlines, chaos on the Long Island Railroad. The electrical part that caused this had been installed in 1913, almost 100 years ago, 97 years, and it finally gave out. Now, this is a monstrosity. You got to rebuild everything. You got to basically rebuild this country from the bottom up. You got to rebuild the interstate highway system, the freight rail, the passenger rail, the commuter rail. You've got to do the 100 nuclear reactors, the 1,000 hospitals, the 50,000 miles of maglev and fast rail, and so forth. You simply say to the Fed, you are now going to expand your purview. We're forcing you to do it. We're not inviting you. We're telling you, you have to do this. You are going to discount the bonds of states and regional authorities. Some of them have to be created so that they can build the infrastructure we need. And this can be done then for the 100 nuclear reactors, which would have to be the heart of the entire thing. So credit creation and job creation. Buy the bonds of the state authorities and states and authorities and use that to finance a huge campaign of infrastructure. And this goes right into the trillions. Remember, when the reactionaries say, yeah, but that doesn't reflect the price of capital. No, the reactionaries don't seem to complain when Wall Street gets 0% financing. That doesn't ever seem to show up on their screen, that the Fed gives 0% loans to J.P. Morgan Chase. I would, again, put General Motors and Chrysler in a different category because that's industrial production. That's something you must have in order to live. We all lived for quite a while without derivatives, but you've got to have industrial production. So therefore, you want to put preferential earmarks on the money that it goes into industry and manufacturing and infrastructure. You'll get a recovery. There is no mystery. There are plenty of quivers left in the arrow, plenty of policy bullets. Back in a minute.